What's up, everybody? Joe Brown here. This is the Heresy Financial Show, and today we are going to be looking at two charts that show real incomes in the United States are crashing. And an economy that relies on spending like the United States, this is not a stat that you want to see dropping if you're concerned about a recession or a crash or the health of the economy. Ready? Let's dive in. All right, so earlier today, Danielle DiMartino Booth tweeted out these charts from the Daily Shot, and I highly suggest you follow her on Twitter if you're not already, constantly putting out great stuff. We're going to first take a look at this chart. This is the U.S. Real Disposable Income chart. So a couple of things to notice about this chart. First thing you're going to notice is that purple line that is going up and to the right. That's basically the trend since 2015. The black line is going to be the reality, what actually happened. And obviously, you're going to see a spike in real income when you hand out a bunch of money in stimmy checks. You give everybody 2% mortgages or 3% mortgages. Everybody refis and gets an actual raise on their personal income because their expenses on their house goes down. And half the other people do a cash out refinance, so they get $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 just plopped down in their bank account to do whatever they want with. Massive amount of stimulus means immediately up front, what you're going to have happen is a massive explosion in real personal income. At that point, no inflation has taken place. Everybody gets a bunch of cash. But what happens in the game of Monopoly if the banker decides to double everybody's cash? Everybody will then be able to afford any property they land on. Everybody will then be able to afford to put houses and hotels on their properties. And pretty soon, it will be more expensive than it was before to go around the board. And that is exactly what we see here in this chart of U.S. real disposable personal income. Suddenly, everybody feels like they have an influx of purchasing power. But the one thing we know about purchasing power is that it's like slices on a pizza. Just because you put more slices in the pizza doesn't mean you get more pizza. It just means it takes more slices to get the same amount of pizza. And when you give everybody money, that's the way you measure the real wealth in an economy. Money's not wealth. Money measures wealth. And so when you give people more money, all it does is increases the amount of money it takes to get the same amount of wealth as it did before. And we are seeing that exact thing with this chart here. We saw an increase in what people thought was purchasing power, massive spike in income. But as that money worked its way throughout the economy, prices started to shoot up higher. And we are now seeing a decrease in real personal income, real disposable personal income. It is now trending down. Now, you might look at this and say, hey, well, that's just compensation for the massive spike that we had before. If the purple line is the trend, we overcorrected to the upside. Now we're going to overcorrect to the downside. Maybe so. But the problem is what happens as a result of centrally planned economies, especially with stimulus, especially with purchasing power being redirected by the state, which is what stimulus checks are, which is what handouts are, which is what taxes are, which is what all the things that a central planner, like a central bank or a central government, does to an economy to try and stop a recession. What you have is misallocation of resources. You have mistakes in economic calculation by businesses and individuals because they think the savings pool is larger than it is. They think they have more spending power than they do. They think they can bring projects to completion. They think that they can get debt and sustain it at a certain rate. But what actually happens is there was something going on behind the scenes that nobody understood because you were messing with the amount of money in the system. So as that money works its way throughout the system, now you've made plans from a year ago that no longer can take place, that can no longer be brought to completion because the pricing information wasn't accurate to reality because of the massive intervention, the massive amount of money, and that leads to wealth destruction. So it's not as if economic growth is a slow, would be a straight line up. Without intervention, but with intervention, you get the booms and the busts, but inevitably you still land at the same place. It's just more volatile. That is not the reality. The reality is that the intervention from the top, the printing of the money, the transferring of wealth causes a misallocation of resources that causes wealth destruction. That means that instead of just being more volatile along the way to the same place, you actually end up lower than you would have otherwise. This is not something that we want to see. Now, the next chart that we are going to look at is going to be the U.S. personal savings as a percent of disposable personal income. So this is the savings rate. Again, this is not a chart that you want to see if you are the person that's in charge of rescuing the economy, of getting growth back on track. Ultimately, we know that it is destined for failure anyway, and this is more proof that that is where it is going. Because we look at this green bar, that was the trend before, again, since about 2015. The massive spike has now been trending downwards since about 6 or 7, maybe 8 months ago. It's been going lower and lower and lower. And now the United States individuals, corporations, households, people do not have the amount of savings that they thought they would. Again, this is a percent of disposable personal income. And so the amount of savings that people have are dropping. Now, keep in mind, going back to this first chart that we were looking at, the real disposable personal income, this is real. This is not nominal. So this is adjusted for inflation. That's a big deal because that means that if you look at the dollar amount, people think they're getting richer. If you just look at the amount of money people have, and you just look at the amount of money people are making in their paychecks, people think they are getting richer. People are getting raises, cost of living adjustments, bonuses. But if from January of 2021 through January of 2022, your income didn't go up by at least 8%, your real income went down. And if from February of 2021 through February of 2022, your income didn't go up by at least 8.1%, your real income went down. The cost of living outpaced your increase in wages. And that's only if we believe the official numbers. And if you look at your budget, I can guarantee you your cost of living went up by more than 8%. So did you get a 10% raise? Did you get a 15% raise? Maybe, maybe not. Most Americans did not. And that's why real disposable incomes are going down, because people are getting wage raises. People's earnings are going up by 5%, 6%, 7%. But guess what? Cost of living is rising faster, so their real income is dropping. And again, this was pointed out by Danielle DiMartino Booth on Twitter when she posted these charts. The U.S. economy is 68% consumption. That's the vast majority of what drives our economy, because we have a fiat economy built on fiat money, which incentivizes debt, which makes people go into debt in order to cause more and more growth built on a bigger and bigger pile of debt that is not real growth. It is fake growth fueled by the expansion of the money supply and a credit bubble, and it's destined to collapse because eventually you have a deleveraging. A leveraging up is always and inevitably followed by a deleveraging. You cannot avoid that. It is an iron law of finances, and that you might not always notice it if it happens at the exact same time as a massive increase in production from a technological revolution like the Industrial Revolution or the dot-com bubble burst, or the dot-com bubble, the boom first, and or if we have in the future like an AI and robotics revolution that just maximizes human activity, and we can offload all human labor, unwanted human labor, onto robots that can take care of everything that we want and need, and then all we have to worry about is doing what we actually want, and then there's wealth and prosperity for everybody. But barring that, you will always get the deleveraging, and the deleveraging still happens either way. You just don't notice it because it's outpaced by the increase in growth and production. It's overcompensated for that way. So this is not something that we want to see here. Ultimately, it is the reality, and it's the outcome of mistakes in central planning. And by mistakes, I mean central planning, just by itself. But ultimately, this is not the place that anybody wants to be. So again, this is why I do what I do, because I want more and more people to be able to understand how the system works, because I don't want my friends and family and you guys and anybody else to look at their paychecks and see, hey, I got a 5% raise, I got an 8% raise, and think to themselves, I'm doing great. If you kept up with inflation, you're staying even. And chances are, inflation in your area and for your cost of living and your individual budget needs, chances are your cost of living is increasing faster. So you have to understand the rules of the game, how the game is played, and position yourself accordingly in order to win. That's the number one thing to do. First is understand how the game is played. Once you know the rules, then you can start playing to win. I am going to be in Dallas on May 6th through May 8th for the Market Disruptors live event. I'll be speaking there. The last one in November, it was a great event. If you are able to join this time, it's going to be in Dallas. I would love to see you there, love to meet you there, hang out with you, talk with you, grab some drinks. It'll be a great time, and it'll be a great conference. Lots of heavy hitters at this conference. I'm honored to be involved with it. As always, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day.